We're here for a town hall meeting hosted by Senator Morell to discuss the status of hurricane preparedness.
Due to the recent flooding we've had in New Orleans, a lot of constituents, businesses have expressed concern as to the state of our flood control systems, our protection system for a hurricane. So what we've done today is we've brought together all the different agencies that regulate and deal with coastal restoration, flood protection, hurricane preparedness to give an overview of where we are in regards to those different areas, so that people can be aware that though we do have a weak link that is currently the Sewage and Water Board, the chain of protection regarding hurricanes is definitely intact. Thank you everybody for being here tonight. My name is Senator J.P. Morell. As you may have heard on social media or via all the meows that covered this event, the rationale behind having this meeting was that after the terrible flood events that we had recently, the rain events that plagued the New Orleans area, primarily in Gentilly, Lakeview, parts of New Orleans East, in the upper and lower Ninth Ward, we saw some failures for some drainage and pumping that caused some widespread flooding. Now, obviously, that is a huge concern, but as your state senator, as a legislator, I began to receive calls saying, well, if we flooded during this rain event, what happens when a hurricane comes? And though I know many things, I know lots of things, I did not know the complete answer to that question. I've been briefed, like many legislators are, on the current status of our flood and hurricane protection from outside forces, but I realized that at that time, the public is not really being educated necessarily on a regular basis as far as what is the current status of our coastal restoration and flood protection. So I reached out to the various authorities that are tasked with those roles, and they're here tonight to both present to you, and like I said, brief presentations, because the goal is mainly to answer your questions, but brief presentations on the current state of flood protection, hurricane protection in the southeast Louisiana area, New Orleans in particular, then to answer your questions and concerns regarding the state of that protection. So with that, I'd like to invite the Coastal Restoration and Flood Authority up to give a presentation on where we are today on coastal flood protection.
My name is Ignacio Haruch. I am the Chief of Operations of the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. I'm here to talk to you guys about the system. This system was upgraded, as everybody knows, after Katrina. We had a lot of upgrades to protect the periphery and the internal protection of New Orleans. So in that, you're going to hear a lot of acronyms, and you'll see in parentheses that I have these acronyms there on how we, with the Corps and the levee districts, speak about the projects that were done. So the big project that we did, the Corps of Engineers took on, was the Hurricane Storm Damage and Risk Reduction System. During this, the Corps designed the system, and we are the non-federal sponsor. We signed a project partnership agreement with the Corps of Engineers that at some point we have to pay it back, and we have to pay back our percent, and as a non-federal sponsor, we have to operate and maintain this system, okay? So what are our responsibilities from the Coastal Protection Authority? So CPRA is responsible, like I said, for hurricane protection, coastal restoration across the coastal areas of Louisiana. Throughout the life of the project and during any event that happens, we as CPRA interact with the local entities and work together to provide the protection to the people. And also, as these projects are being built, we make sure that we perform the right inspections, that the plans that the Corps has, they submit to us, we check the plans, we go through all of that, what engineers do basically to make sure that things are built according to the plans. So one of the things that we do, we perform inspections during construction. Then we look at the maintenance to make sure that the local entities that are now responsible for maintaining this system are doing the maintenance and doing the operations of the system. So we also provide technical assistance when needed, as well as the Corps of Engineers. Since we're partners in all of this, we rely on them sometimes to give us some technical assistance. We also review a lot of permits. I know you guys have seen a lot of work going on, and there's people that, there's companies or anybody that wants to build something near the levee. We, along with the Corps, we have to approve that project, and at the end, The local SLFPA-East, for instance, since we're here today, is the one that gives these permits out. But again, we do the engineering, we check all of this, make sure things are right, and the Corps does the same thing. We do a levee inspection training class every year, sometimes twice a year, depending on how many people request it, and we do a certification. We also coordinate with local, state, and federal jurisdictions to fulfill emergency requests from parishes, levee boards, and other jurisdictions. We also, after a storm, we participate in inspections with the Corps, with the levee districts, to make sure that we know what happens and what repairs need to be done, if any. So, again, talking about, I'm going to refer to it as the HSDRRS system. This system, as you guys know, was $14.5 billion. And you may or may not know, it's about a $14.5 billion system that was designed, again, by the Corps of Engineers. It consists of 350 miles of levees and flood walls, 73 pump stations, 3 canal closure structures with pumps, 4 gated outlets. And this system is to reduce the surge and rainfall risk from a 100-year storm. So, again, it's the perimeter of the system, and I'll show you in a second, is to, it's comprised of levees, flood walls, and that's to reduce the surge, okay? Then you have the rainfall risk, right? So for that, there's closure pumps, storm, there's a lot of storm proofing that was done internally, and some drainage canals that were improved. So at the end, like I said before, we have to pay this back. It's a $3 billion payback that the state has, and it equates to about $100 million a year for the next 30 years. So this system, we look at it in 2 parts. We call it the Lake Pontchartrain and Vicinity Project, which we refer to as LPV, and the West Bank Project, which is WBV. Right now, what you're looking at is the LPV project. In that project, again, is to reduce storm risk on the east bank of the Mississippi River, and again, it includes levees, flood walls, gates, and pump stations. Okay, so once the projects are turned over by the Corps of Engineers, we have to in turn turn it over to the local levee districts. In this case, for the LPV project, it's the Pontchartrain Levee District and SLFPA-East, which is the Southeast Flood Protection Authority East. So the SLFPA-East is composed of East Jeff, Orleans, St. Bernard, and they're the ones that operate, again, from the yellow line to the blue line that you see on the screen. Again, it's a system, so there was a lot of upgrades and a lot of things that were done, and one of the projects that was done is the outfall canals, that we call it the OFC canals. Again, this is where most of the New Orleans rainwater during a storm, it all drains through here, and the improvement on that was that the levees were lined on both sides of the canals with flood walls that are situated on top of each levee. So it was basically hardened. The improvements are along 3 main drainage outfall canals in New Orleans: 17th Street, Orleans Avenue, and London Avenue. Who's responsible for O&M? SLFPA-East. Then you have the permanent canal closures and pumps, which we call the PCCP project. That's an ongoing project. It's comprised of 3 pump stations. Each, one's located on 17th Street, the other one's Orleans and London, like I said before. So that water that comes in from the city goes straight to these pump stations, will eventually go straight to these pump stations and operated accordingly. I know you guys have seen that there's some old pump stations out there. We call those the interim closure structures. Those are what we call the ICS structures. Right now, if there were to be a storm to come into the city, and those would be the pumps that are going to be operated during a storm. The Corps of Engineers operates it. There's a water control manual on how it operates, when you operate these pump stations. The 3 pump stations that you see that we call the PCCP project It's expected to be completed and turned over to us before the next hurricane season. So then again, now I'm talking about the West Bank and Vicinity project, and I'll run through that again. It's the same thing as the LPV project, same thing. Levees, flood walls, and gates and pumps were built on that system. Who's responsible for this? It's for O&M is St. Charles Parish, the Southeast Flood Protection Authority West, and Plaquemines Parish. Okay, so now we're getting into the internal part. I just went on the periphery, on the external part of the system. So again, there was some stormproofing. There was a stormproofing project internally. Those improvements were improvements to interior pump stations in Jefferson and Orleans parishes. These stormproofing provides measures to help maintain pump station operations during a storm. So what does that mean? I mean, we hardened, the stations were hardened. Some of them were lifted. They put, if they needed an extra generator was put. It was different things that were put on the stormproofing project. Who's responsible for O&M on this is Jefferson Parish Drainage Department and the Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans. Then we get to the SELA project. I know you guys, if you live in the city and you've seen a lot of construction going on internally, that's the Southeast Louisiana Urban Flood Damage Reduction System. We call it the SELA system. That's an internal project to take care of rainfall. And that project provides a flood risk reduction up to a level associated with a 10-year rainfall event. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that a rainstorm that has a rainstorm that has a 10% annual probability of occurring, and it equates to approximately 9 inches of rain over a 24-hour period in the area. That system cost about $2 billion. There's been $2 billion of improvements in Jefferson and Orleans parishes. And it improves, generally supports in the parish's master plan. So in other words, when we signed the agreement with the Corps of Engineers as the non-federal sponsor on this, we did a cooperative endeavor agreement with the local levee drainage districts. In other words, they have been talking to the Corps of Engineers. They basically, they are designing their own project, and we're just the non-federal sponsor. So at the end, all of this, they're also paying Sewage and Water Board, Jefferson Parish. They're the ones paying their cost share for this project to the federal government. So again, who's responsible for O&M on the SELA? That would be Jefferson Parish Drainage Department and Sewage and Water Board in New Orleans. So again, it's an entire system that's been built. And so I kind of wanted to summarize it all in this pie chart that we have here of how many projects have been turned over to date to us. So on the West Bank, out of 71 projects, 63 of them have been completed. On SELA project, 27 out of the 50 projects have been completed. Inner Harbor Canal project, that's been turned over. The Outfall Canal project, that's been turned over. PCCP, it says 0 to 3. It's actually one project. All 3 pump stations get turned over at once. The New Orleans to Venice project, it's in here. That's 31 projects. Out of that, 15 of them have been turned over. Similar to the LPV and WBV, levees, flood walls, pump stations. And we have the armoring project ongoing right now. That armoring project, basically, it's a resiliency feature that was added to the levees. So when the storm surge comes, goes over the levee, the water comes over, we did not want scouring on the protected side. So think about this, it's just like a football field mat being placed on top of these levees, and then grass to grow on top of the levee. Then you have, obviously, when you build projects, you have to have your mitigation. And then, like I talked about earlier, you have the stormproofing projects, and those are all complete. And out of the LPV projects, out of 67 projects, 65 of those have been completed to date. And there's the whole pie here is 308 Out of that, 225 projects have been turned over to date. So again, I don't know if you guys are keeping up with the news, but that's part of our job too. My job is to keep up with the hurricanes and where they are and what's going on, so we can then interact with the locals, the local entities, to make sure that everybody's ready, that the system's ready, that the pump stations have fuel, and it's, I call it the big dance, because everybody's talking to each other. We're talking to the Corps of Engineers, we're talking to SLFPA-East, Plaquemines Parish, everybody around the system. So that's part of the other part that we do during a storm. So again, during hurricanes, there's high water events. We get called in, and large-scale coastal oil spills or hazmat incidents.
What I'm going to talk about a little bit today is the inspection process. And Joe asked me to talk a little bit about the inspection process when it comes to the work that we do here at the authority. And so I'm going to talk, first of all, a little bit about the infrastructure that we have to take care of, the things that make up the levee system that form the defense for hurricane storm surge and riverine flooding for the metropolitan area. Tell you a little bit about the inspection process, how that works, who's involved in that, and the different types of inspections that we do. So this slide here is basically a layout of our system, and you'll see that there's different colored lines on here. The yellow solid lines that you see is what we call our perimeter system for the hurricane storm damage risk reduction system. This is the front line of defense. The red lines that you see are interior levees, interior to that perimeter system. They are no longer part of the main line of defense. Prior to Katrina they were, now they're not, but they're still needed because they still hold back water under certain circumstances, so they still have to be taken care of. And then you'll see some green lines, and those are levees that have been built over the years, typically by the local authorities. In some cases they were the original hurricane levees that were built many years ago. They are still in service today and taken care of because they form a barrier for drainage. And so when the rains fall and the pumps have to kick on, the water is pumped on the other side of these levees to keep the populated areas dry. So to give you an idea of what that equates to in some statistics, we have over 192 miles of levees and flood walls within our jurisdictional area. That's a lot. Over 3,500 acres of turf that we have to maintain. So it's a lot of grass cutting, and it sounds like somewhat superficial. Oh, you guys just cut grass, but let me tell you, that's a really important part of the job that we do, because if we don't cut that grass, then trees grow up on the levees, and the levees fall into disrepair, and you can't take care of them, and they can develop leaks during a storm, and also maintaining a good turf cover prevents erosion. If you do get a storm that's larger than the levee was designed for and the water comes over the levee, well, that turf keeps the levee from washing away. Floodgates. Ignacio talked a little bit about this dance. Well, we have a well-choreographed dance that we have to do whenever there's a storm coming. We have over 240 floodgates that in a major storm we have to get out there and close. Our people have to go out there in inclement weather and difficult conditions and make sure that all those gates are closed so the water doesn't come in. And a new addition to the system since Katrina are all these navigational floodgates. These are very complicated structures from the standpoint of mechanics. Typically levee districts dealt with earthen levees and maybe some flood walls. Well, now we have these heavy-duty mechanical, electrical type structures that we're responsible for taking care of. We have 8 of those, and a couple of those are major structures. So a lot of infrastructure to take care of. And so this great system that the Corps has built, has designed and built for the metropolitan New Orleans area, is probably the best system that New Orleans has ever had. But if it's not taken care of, the best it will ever be was the day that it was turned over to us, and then it will continue to degrade over time after that. And so we have to be good stewards of that $14 billion that Ignacio talked about. And so, one of the ways that we try to make sure that we are doing our jobs well is we do a lot of inspections on the system. And so we have what's called this levee inspection cycle. It starts off with field inspections. So we have inspectors that go out there, look at all the various pieces and parts of the system, take notes, identify any issues that what they think might be issues, turn that in to the engineering department. There's an engineering review of all those comments, all that data that's been collected in the field. And then the engineers take that and prioritize that and say, okay, well, these are the things that really we need to address quickly. These are some things that, well, you know, we have some time to deal with, and perhaps there are other things that, you know, we just need to monitor. We make that decision in our engineering department, and we prioritize those issues that we find in an inspection. Then we get with our operations group and we schedule that work, complete the work, and then we track it, and then we report the progress back up the line. And then the cycle starts all over. And this is just for, you know, the basic cycle for routine inspections. Just to give you an idea, to facilitate this, we've had to go out and start developing some software to kind of make sure that we're keeping abreast of the latest technology to collect the data and actually use it in an effective way. And so, you know, after Katrina, when we started doing these inspections and documenting them, it was all on paper. And I used to get a stack of paper from Orleans Levee District that, I'm not kidding you, it was this tall that I would have to go through for an inspection report, and I had to sign, it must have been 75 or 80 pages with every quarterly inspection that came along. So we started looking for better ways to do that, more efficient ways to do that, because with all that paper, there's always a chance you're going to skip something, you're going to miss something that's really important. And so we got with the West Authority. They had started developing a piece of software for collecting this data in the field. We took theirs, made some modifications to it, and we've incorporated that into our workflow now. And the way the system works is, you know, it's a drop-down menu system that's on a pad. And so if you look in this picture, you see our inspector out there, he has a pad with him. So he can go identify an issue, he can take a picture of it with that pad, he can record all the comments associated with that issue on that pad, and it's stored into a database. There are messages sent to various people that, hey, this data has been collected, and then we can review it and then take the necessary action. And this is for routine quarterly inspections. Now, these types of inspections are done 4 times a year by our people. Then we have these other types of inspections that we do. So it seems like lately we've had some high river events more frequently than perhaps in the past 20 years or so. And you know, we have this Mississippi River levee that protects the city and the outlying areas around the city. We have to be very cognizant of what's happening with that levee, because most of you know, when the river is high, you know, maybe as high as 17 feet at the foot of Canal Street, you're going about your normal daily lives without a single thought about, gee, maybe I might flood, okay? But if that Mississippi River levee has a problem, you know, that is a big problem for all of us. And so we take that job very seriously. We're out there whenever the river is high, you know, inspecting that levee. In fact, when we go to a phase 2 flood fight, we're out there every single day, 7 days a week, collecting data and making sure we understand what's happening with the levee and taking any necessary action if there are any problems. Talked a little bit about these navigational floodgates, these complex structures. We developed a special piece of software for our maintenance crews that take care of that to make sure that we're inspecting them properly. And as a matter of fact, to do the actual quarterly inspections, which you see here, we have a team of people that work for a consultant that come out 4 times a year and inspect those structures. So it's like the surge barrier, the sector gates, these other navigational floodgates. They come out, do the inspection, submit those reports to us, we review those, and then schedule the work. So to give you an idea of, you know, how many people are looking at this information in the space of a year, I put this kind of chart together. It's a little bit busy, but if you look at the red X's, those are the people that are responsible for these various types of inspections. And so the routine quarterly inspections, we take care of that. That's our responsibility. CPRA provides assistance to us in that regard, and we report those results out to both CPRA and the Corps once they're done. Annual inspections, those are done by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, okay? We participate with them on those inspections, and then they send us the reports after they've done their inspections, and we review those reports and make any necessary work orders and get the work done if anything has to be done. One of the most comprehensive inspections that we do after the system is built is called a periodic inspection, and that's done by the Corps of Engineers. They'll come out and it's done about every 5 years, look at the system, make sure that we are doing our jobs and being good stewards of the infrastructure that's been turned over to us, and the reports are turned over to us in CPRA. But then we have damage assessments after every storm. We inspect those. All of us get together and do that, and we share that information. Same with the flood fights. And then after all this is done, really during this whole process, twice a year we file semi-annual reports with the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, and they compile those reports with everybody else in the state that has levees, turn that into the Corps. So it's a very rigorous process, and I can tell you the people that work in this business take this very seriously, and we work very hard to make sure we get it right. For preventive maintenance, I haven't talked too much about that. I mean, you know, we talked a lot about inspections that we do on a routine basis, but really on some of the more complex structures, we're out there, you know, kind of inspecting things almost on a daily basis. And so we have a special piece of software that we've developed to do that, to track that, to help us manage not just the inspections of those facilities, but also the actual work that has to be done to make sure that we're capturing the information, doling that work out to the right people, tracking that work, making sure it's done in a timely way, and then documenting that and then moving on to the next cycle. And so you see, we have a whole lot of really spectacular infrastructure that we take care of, a lot of assets that have been entrusted to us to take care of, that we have to make sure we do a good job of. But you know what? It takes people to do that. And so our most valuable assets are really our people, because you can see with all the inspection work that we have to do, and all the operations that I didn't even talk about today, the system, you just can't build a system and then walk away from it. It takes people to take care of it and people to operate it. And I got to tell you, I'm really proud of the people that we have working for us. They do a great job. They take their job seriously. Many of them have been working here for a long time, many years, longer than I have. And I'm also very proud of the support and the help that we get from our partner agencies, particularly Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They provide us with some valuable assets that we might not otherwise have. And so with that, that's all I have.